Good evening. Someday I'm going to release a tell-all book of the behind the scenes of running Low Ink, and all the DMs that I get that are Low Ink related that I don't respond to because I just don't. My DMs are not the place to be asking Low Ink questions, but some of these things. Slam Blitz. Yeah, I'm gonna ignore that message request. Alright. Leak my favorite Super Nintendo soundtrack. Does anyone know what this is? Send them to you, Brush. I send some of them to you, Brush. You see some of them. You don't see all of them. Don't be hurting people, Brush. I don't think IPL could withstand a lawsuit. I don't think we have that kind of infrastructure. Financial capital to survive something like that, maybe. friends, and welcome back to the Popcast. Whenever you're listening to this, whether it's live or VOD, Twitch or YouTube, or Spotify, while you're still waiting for your power to come back on from the storms this past weekend, wondering why there are no Bigfoot players in your lobby, falling for the April Fool's joke of believing that a team has disbanded, even though that same team made the same joke last year. Whatever it is that you're doing right now, appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. Unless I don't. I think I've said this the past couple of years. I think this is the third April Fool's episode of the third time we've gone through an April Fool's Day on the podcast. This is by far the dumbest holiday. First off, if I don't get off for work, it doesn't even count as a holiday. But the fact that we just made a day where everyone just lies is so stupid. And now that there's a Twitter and a social media and internet that we can use to abuse this gimmick even more, I think it's time that we come to a decision that April Fool's Day needs to be canceled. And I will lead the charge to cancel it. News of tournaments may be of interest to the casual listener of the podcast. Believe it or not, the InkTV qualifier number 2 is this upcoming weekend. If you enjoyed the first one so much, whether playing in it or watching it, guess what? You get to do it all over again this upcoming weekend. Just play it right again. Make sure you sign up for it. I believe the deadline is still the same as it was last time, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Friday. That event starting on Saturday, so make sure you guys sign up now, sooner rather than later. Does start.gg, it's been a long time since I've actually registered for something on that site. I saw a lot of teams that played last weekend already sign up for this one, but their teams are incomplete. Does everybody on your team have to accept the invite every single time you sign up for a tournament on start.gg? I think you do. That is so stupid. On Battlefy, I don't need my teammates' consent anymore. Once they agree to join my team, I can just auto-sign the whole team up for any tournament I see fit, whether they want to play in it or not. Start.gg is, it's got some nice features for production and TO stuff. Not friendly towards the players whatsoever. It is what it is. It's also Little Squid League week. This Saturday is Little Squid League number 29. I think the last time I checked earlier today, they were at 50 teams registered. Will they get 50 more that sign up this past week or over the course of this week? They should. They honestly should to get up to that 100 mark. But Little Squid League's going to be going on. It's going to be tough viewership-wise for Little Squid League to be going up against InkTV. Because that thing's pulling some numbers. Now, basically, Little Squid League has to go up against 4 other streams. That's going to be tough. I don't even know what the Minnow Cup numbers were for last Saturday. But we will be talking about Minnow Cup at some point today in the weekly recap. Today, we are going to be talking with Walky. The Walky, Walkman _04 from InkTV to get his perspective on the tournament the past weekend, InkTV stuff, commentators, and just life in general. Lots of cool stuff to be talking about with Walky, and we'll be getting to that. But first, for all the bitching and moaning that we do about Splatoon, about how much we hate the meta, how much we hate actually playing the game, about how much we hate getting spawn camp during turf war. As much as we complain and are constantly negative about this video game, at the end of the day, it's a really damn good video game, isn't it? Like, this game is really fun. And the proof is in the fact that all the people that are constantly complaining about the video game keep coming back to it the very same day they complain about it. Oh, I hate solo queue so much. Okay. queue up. You'll be in the next lobby. We'll see you there. But it takes a tourney like the InkTV Resurgence League qualifier to remind us that this game is really exciting. It's really entertaining, and it's a great product. It's a great thing to watch, and it does have some esport potential as the game itself, excluding all the other outside factors that keep it from becoming what it could potentially be. But the video game itself is really, really good. And we get to appreciate these kinds of things because of the tournament that InkTV put on Saturday. Appreciate this why this is here, though. Because once this league is over, I mean, you guys are just seeing the qualifiers for the league. The league hasn't even started yet. And once the league is over, you're probably not going to see anything of this caliber for a long time. It would be great if there were other tournaments that could stream multiple viewpoints at the same time. Every single match that's in top 16. That's going to draw in all of the big name players. That's going to basically encapsulate the attention of the entire competitive community and hopefully some of the casual community as well. And just bring us all together to focus on one thing. It might not come back for a while. So appreciate it while it's here. The reason I say it might not come back for a while is just to give you guys a little bit of a peek behind the curtains of what needs to happen just for Saturday to actually take place. It is a lot of effort and manpower that goes into putting on a production that you guys saw Saturday. Let's take a normal tournament. If you were to stream Squid Junction, what do you need for that to stream just for like a couple hours? You need 3 people. You need a streamer and 2 casters. That's it. Some other tournaments aren't even lucky to have 3 people. Sometimes the person streaming is one of the casters, and it's just their friend that's coming on to be the co-caster. And you just got 2 people running the entire production for an event. But most events have 3 people in a VC at a time. For this event, for the InkTV qualifier number 1, it required not 3, but 16 plus people all to be available at the same exact time with like a certain bar of experience required to even be considered to be a part of the production that it was. You needed 2 casters in each VC and 2 streamers. So if you looked at the actual, some of you might not have even noticed it. And as I was commentating with Fusion, I didn't really pay much attention to it, even though I could see the actual thing. The overview, the overhead view of the map was visible the entire time. If you looked in the bottom left corner, instead of seeing this way and booyah on the little D-pad option, you saw a little mini map of what was going on live, and it was just there the entire time. It's so small that it's hard to like make out exactly what's happening, but it was still there. In order to do that, you need 2 people in a VC, and those 2 people in the VC need to be in the game lobby with capture cards, recording 2 different footages at the same time. And you got to spend some time making sure that they're synced up together, so that the broadcast doesn't show the mini map something happening 3 seconds ahead of what you're seeing on the player perspective cam. So it requires a ton of work. So that's 4 people in 1 VC, but there's 4 streams going on. So you need 16 people to pull off the event that was taking place on Saturday. I said 16 plus, right? When you have more people, it brings up the situation of more problems possibly arising. More money, more problems. Let me just tell you some of the fun things that everyone got to deal with on April Fool's Day. First off, Nine's power went out. So Nine's supposed to commentate with Zach. All of a sudden, that needs to be rearranged like 4 or 5 hours before the tournament. So there was plenty enough time to get that figured out. In the meantime, Elemental, who is the streamer for Proving Grounds, We love Elemental. Elemental was scheduled to be the spectator cam person for the Dapple Productions crew, which was Ellie, Jack, myself, and Fusion. And Elemental, well, halfway through setting up all that stuff, Elemental's power went out. Luckily, though, Nine's power had come back on at this point, so Nine, already scheduled out, no longer to commentate because we found a replacement for that. Nine then went into the spectator role for the Dapple Productions crew. So we get Nine situated, get all that figured out. Then all of a sudden, Walky, who is scheduled to cover for Nine, Walky's power went out. No internet or anything there. So all of a sudden, Nine, whose power came back on, got shifted back into the original role. And then Marsh, who I don't even know what Marsh was scheduled to do that day, got called up from AAA ball to become the Dapple Productions spec cam operator about like 5 or 10 minutes before the tournament actually went live. So all of that had to be configured constantly. And yeah. Rough day, but everything got through and everything got figured out, and well, everybody ended up having a good time, unless they didn't. By the way, just a quick shout out to whoever's the genius that decided that the IPL guy, should be not on IPL but on the Dapple Productions channel. If when I first saw that, I was like, what in the world? Why would they do that? And then I realized it was April 1st, and I was like, oh, this is just a good April Fool's joke. But I was like, man, that's like putting Ronald McDonald in a Burger King commercial. But we got through it, and I got my first ever official broadcast casting for something on the Dapple Productions channel. How about that? There's a first time for everything. So what did you get, though, out of that extra manpower? What did you get by adding 16 plus people, dedicate them exclusively to just your stream? Well, it takes a standard run-of-the-mill qualifier with no true winner, with 4 teams just stopping before you get to the matches you actually want to see. They don't even play that. They just stop. You take a tournament like that, and you make it into one of the most exciting and most watched things this competitive scene has seen in years. In years. Probably back to when Walky was actually playing the video game. We'll probably talk about that coming up. No tourney, though, would ever attempt to do something like this. But the things you get is to see a lot of these matches that you would never typically see. Typically, in a double limb 16 team tournament, your path is something like this: the 8 versus 9 seed, and then you bounce down. Then you play like you'd bounce down to the bottom bracket and stream like the 2 closest seeds there. Eventually, you'll get the 3 versus 4, and then in theory, the 1 versus 2 in finals. Like, there's a set dedicated path so that you don't stream the same team over and over again, and you get some new blood in there. But you would never stream the 1 versus 16 match, right? You would never stream Jackpot versus Bet. Nobody, that's not the match anybody would want to watch. You would stream Ascension versus DNA, which was the 8 versus 9 match, which of course it was streamed and wasn't the most exciting match of the round. It went 3-0 in a competitive 3-0, but DNA scored like 40 total points across 3 games, across the 3 modes combined. It wasn't a whole lot of high-flying offense, exciting Splatoon. But that's the 8-9 matchup that you would always stream. The 1-16 matchup, you would never stream that because, in theory, that's going to be the biggest curb stomp of the entire tournament. Well, Jackpot versus Bet, 1 versus 16, turned out to be the most interesting set of round 1 for all of the wrong reasons. It wasn't just 9, Walky, and Elemental that were having power Wi-Fi issues. Turns out Leafy was experiencing it as well. And Leafy just kept blinking in and out of existence during that set, causing it to go to a game 5 when it should have been done in about 6 minutes across all 3 games. So you had an interesting match that you actually got to see. And if you don't see that match, and you don't look on Twitter to see what people are talking about it for what actually happened, you just look at the score and be like, wow, Bet took Jackpot to a game 5. Jackpot seems like they're a little overrated, or maybe Bet is underrated. But no, when you actually get to see it and hear the commentators talk about what's going on live, it puts things into a little bit more perspective. So you get to see some cool things like that. You get to see the NA versus EU matchups, which is becoming a much more interesting storyline now, that not only are we getting more tournaments where these two regions get to actually play against each other, but you get to see every single match. You don't get to see the match that us TOs want you guys to see. If you want to go watch Spark versus Full Send, you could go watch that. If you want to go watch any of these other Squidding Good, I believe they played some other EU team as well. But any match you want to see, you can go out of your way to watch it, of NA versus EU, which gives you guys more weight into the argument for whatever region you think is better or more, just more experience across the board. As far as my opinion is concerned, just from what I saw Saturday, and it's probably always been this way, but my NA bias has probably led me to believe something other than what is reality. Yes, Starburst is the best team in the West, and they come from North America. But pound for pound, it really seems like EU is the better region. Pound for pound. Yeah, and North America might even have the best top 3 teams. Like, Jackpot might be better than Alliance Rogue. We'll find out over the course of the league. But looking at it right now, it looks like it could be the 3 best teams coming from NA. But when you go from like team maybe number 3 down to team number like 8 or so, it's all EU. They seem to be the stronger region right now. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that 3 EU teams qualified for this event, with the 1 NA team being freaking Jackpot. Actually, I think Nightmare finished as the second best NA team, but they had to use an EU player subbing for them to help get to that point as well. So the EU versus NA argument, I think, is starting to lead more into the favor of our friends across the pond there. Speaking of Nightmare, they are by far the team that benefited the most from the stream format that you guys saw this last week. The fact that every single match got streamed means that you got to see the entirety of Nightmare's run through Losers Bracket live right in front of your stupid faces. And it's noteworthy because if this was any other tournament, you would not have seen Nightmare at all. There would be no chance of Nightmare ever being put on stream. You wouldn't put on their round 1 match because, again, you'd be busy streaming Ascension versus DNA, and you would never dip down to the Losers match. Like, you would never stream Losers round 2, them playing Full Send. We would talk about it, though. Eventually you would get to a point where the commentators would be like, wow, Graveyard Shift is playing against at least 1 death, the 0 death team. That's when the commentators would hop in on that round, the loser semifinals. The commentators would probably say something like, Graveyard Shift had to survive a game 5 against Nightmare. You know, that was a team they 3-0'd in round 1. When they might briefly mention like, well, Nightmare had a great run, but here's now Graveyard Shift versus 0 deaths. Let's see how these two teams match up against each other. You would never just talk about the Nightmare thing. But in the prisoner of the moment, because we see every single match happening in front of our eyes, we're seeing these dramatic plays. I still don't understand how IPS stopped the tower against DNA. DNA had no business losing that game. Absolutely no business losing that game. It's the Joby Bryant play from Joe, fading away off the side of the map to throw the clam into the basket to end overtime and ending the game right there. That is something that play, if it's not on TikTok, somebody needs to put it up on TikTok. That seems like instant gazillion likes that you can get off of something like that. All those great moments. The fact that Full Sin basically clowned them in that game 1 Splat Zone's Hagglefish Market, only for Nightmare to turn the tables, how the tables turn, and they win 2 straight against them. Those are all hype moments, and it drives the conversation about Nightmare. But if that was any other tournament, you would have never seen any of that stuff, and you would have never really talked about it. There might be a few tweets on Twitter driven by the Nightmare players about, hey, look what we just did. And there'd be some people talking about it, and I would mention it briefly here on the podcast like I try to do with other things. But when it's on stream and we all see it, Nightmare doesn't have to drive the conversation. We drive it for them because it's exciting to see them play. But in the prisoner of the moment, you start to think, this is the greatest Cinderella run of all time. And when you stop to think about it from the perspective of it's only that because it's being streamed, you start to think, okay, this kind of stuff actually happens way more often than we think. And I'm not just talking about low ink, where literally a Nightmare caliber run happens every single month across every single bracket. But just look at 20XX. In 20XX3, Tempest had a fantastic run through that tournament. And this was before they became DivX. When they got down to losers bracket, they beat 3 straight teams, including a Caden Bad Morning pickup, whoever Giga Wayne was. When they beat Alliance Rogue 2-1 and took Oro Jackson to a game 3, 2-1 as well. Tempest had the same similar kind of run in losers bracket of 20XX3. We kind of mentioned it. We kind of talk about it, but none of it's on stream. So the conversation has to be driven by the Tempest players. Same thing in 20XX4 with Chewits Mafia. Chewits Mafia gets a little bit of recognition because they knocked off the number 1 seed finally, which was the players from Japan. They beat them 2-1 in winner's side. They beat some other notable teams as well before they fell down the losers brackets, where it looks like they beat for ultimately getting bounced out by Alliance Rogue. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think any of those Chewit Mafia matches were on stream. But that's a similar kind of situation. This team that was seeded number 33 in this tournament goes all the way to losers round 7, upsetting very, very notable teams along the way. But because it's not on stream, you don't get to recognize it the same way that it is. If every other tournament had this same kind of streaming power, Nightmare's tournament run would not have seen as, or Nightmare's tournament run would be expanded upon to how other teams have similar runs as well. So put it into a little bit of a perspective like that. When you see it, it puts a lot more weight on it. Now, Nightmare became a very easy team to root for. It's very easy to root for Nightmare because they're the underdogs. And we love an underdog story. It's a American classic, even though every human being on the planet is a big fan of underdogs. The only people, though, who were probably silently rooting hard against Nightmare are all of the teams that are trying to qualify for the league next week. The teams that are desperately making sure that they're available this weekend so that they can get their shot into the league and qualify on Saturday are begging Graveyard Shift to not lose that game 5, because if Nightmare steals a spot and they win that game 5 and they're qualified for the league, now all of a sudden you got to deal with Graveyard Shift next week instead of having to deal with Nightmare the next week. So it becomes this little bit of an awkward thing of realizing what's really on the line here. So let's start talking about that. Let's start talking about what is on the line here for the next upcoming qualifier. 4 spots of the 8 were determined this past Saturday. Jackpot, Zero Deaths, Graveyard Shift, and Alliance Rogue, who didn't drop a single game the entire tournament, by the way, with their new player Fuzzy, it seems like. Very impressive run for those 4 teams. Here's the problem, though. In this qualifier number 2 that's coming up, it is assumed, although I don't think they signed up the last time that I checked, It is assumed that both Starburst and Crush Soda will be playing this weekend's qualifier. If they do end up signing up for this, that is two of the 4 spots automatically gone. 100% gone. There's nothing that's going to stop Starburst or Crush Soda from securing one of the 4 spots that is available to be grabbed this weekend. If for some reason you think there's a shot for Crush Soda to not qualify out of this tournament, remember, Starburst and Crush Soda are not going to play each other this weekend. Starburst is going to be seeded number 1, and I can't envision a scenario unless somebody from Japan comes over and plays where Crush Soda wouldn't be the number 2 seed. But even if they were for some reason the number 3 seed, they're going to dodge Starburst anyways, because in those qualifying matches, it's your 1 and 4 seed and your 2 and 3 seed playing against each other. So they get to dodge each other. And on top of that, the teams that would give Starburst and Crush Soda a run for their money aren't going to be playing this weekend anyways. They've already qualified out. Alliance Rogue, seemingly zero deaths, definitely jackpot, and on a really good day graveyard shift, those teams might be able to threaten those 2 teams, but they're not here. So they just get an automatic walk through the tournament it is going to be that, just a walk through the tournament to get to those 2 spots. So that leaves 2 spots that are up for grabs. And who is going to be taking those final 2 spots? I got about 8 teams, maybe 9 here if I learned how to count correctly, that have an opportunity to fight it out for just 2 spots. First off, we got to talk about Nightmare. Let's keep the conversation with them going. And yes, Nightmare was 1 win away from already qualifying into the league tournament. And that game 1 Mako Mart Splat Zone game where they should have controlled the zone back into their favor, might live in their heads for a little bit, unless they can bounce back this weekend and erase it all by qualifying outright from from this time. Can they do it though? Can they put on this kind of effort 2 weeks in a row? Here's the problem with that. First off, Chewits Mafia is playing, so IPS is going to be on that roster. But more importantly, and any of you that played in Low Ink in the past 2 years, you know this. It's a completely different tournament when you're the team that's not supposed to win it. When you're the team that's supposed to get bounced early, you play completely differently than when you're the team where everybody's looking at you and everybody's gunning at you and everybody is pissed off that you beat them the tournament before. Nightmare is not going to be flying under the radar this time around. Every +1 player that they pissed off on Saturday is going to be gunning for them. It is going to be looking a little bit deeper into how they could beat them on tower control and how they can start shutting them down. If Nightmare, forget about qualifying for the league. If Nightmare gets back to a qualifying game, I think that would be really impressive. I'm not saying the run was a fluke or anything like that, they spent most of their time in loser's bracket, but taking Graveyard Shift to a game 5 in a best of 5 is still kind of notable there. But what I'm saying is, if they can do it again without the surprise factor that they got on some of these teams before, now that these teams know that it's coming and they get all the way to a qualifying match, they don't even have to qualify for the league at that point. They're legit. They've proven their worth along the upper echelon of things. But that's remain to be seen. And also, the quality of opponents they're going to be playing against seemingly are going to get a lot better. Last Resort got bounced in losers round 1. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Arashi played for them, or at least it was assumed that Arashi wasn't going to play for them. I haven't been able to look at those sets. But if Arashi's available, all of a sudden that team becomes a little bit different, probably a little bit better. That boosts their odds in the second qualifier. Full Send did not have 0 play for them. And I'm just operating under the assumption that these same exact rosters that played in Qualifier 1 are going to play in Qualifier 2. Obviously, this is Monday when this Popcast is live. A lot changes between now and registration closes on Friday. But if that same exact full send roster signs up for the second qualifier and Zero actually plays in it, all of a sudden full send, their odds of reaching that qualifier game like we thought they would last time goes up dramatically as well. Seafoam, these guys have the biggest question mark going into this week. They got caught off guard by having 25% of their team just abandon them for the jackpot on the other side of the hill, and had to deal with the new patch, which everybody had to deal with as well. But if you give Seafoam a week to try to figure out, are they going to bring Nolan back? Are they going to try to find a different player? What is their comp going to be going forward? What adjustments are they going to make? And Seafoam didn't look that bad. They were very up and down all day long. They lost an awkward game. I think they were tied 1-1 with the Hood at one point, if not down 0-1. They're up 2-0 on Outsiders until Outsiders came back and almost reverse swept them before Seafoam ultimately won it. And DNA just said, sorry, you guys don't belong here in losers bracket. We're going to destroy you guys before the stream even realizes that this match is being streamed. So Seafoam has the biggest question mark going into this week, but their potential is still up there as a team that can qualify for the league. DNA, a team I just talked about, who bounced Seafoam out of the tournament, I feel like they're going to play in better next week as well. We haven't seen DNA play in a while, and we know they got the roster changeover, and they probably have played in a tournament with this 4-player roster that they showed last month, or this past weekend. But now they got this tournament under their belts. And I already saw Leota's tweet out, man, I should have used Squiffer. And I wonder if they're going to make a little bit of a comp change. They got a week to figure things out. DNA has the DNA to be a strong team. You got to consider them a contender as well. Squidding Good is still in the mix here. A team that played in both qualifying matches. I believe AR and Zero Deaths were the team that knocked them out. But they played in 2 qualifying matches. They seem to be the most consistent team out of all the teams that I'm listing out here. They tied for 5th. They beat Last Resort and Full Send. And also they've beaten Ascension in a recent tournament as well. So let's talk about Ascension real quick. Ascension being this has to be the biggest wild card team of anybody that's remaining. It feels like Ascension's peak is just as good as anybody else. They've taken games off of Jackpot. They've taken Starburst to a game 5. It seems like their low is at the very bottom, though. They got 2-0'd by Outsiders, I believe, who completely erased them out of losers bracket. But Ascension is just like, okay, how are they feeling in this set? Because they also 3-0'd DNA. Where are they going to fall on the scale? It just depends on where they play that day, because they very well could. They're not going to beat like a Starburst or a Crush Soda, but they have the potential to be that annoying team that pushes them further than what those two teams probably want to be going out and playing in a best of 5 set. And you got to give credit to the Outsiders because they actually beat Ascension. They beat Uprising, and their 2 losses went to the maximum distance. Seafoam, they take them to a game 5, and Zero Death, a team that qualified, they took them the distance as losers bracket as well, losing to them 1-2. So Outsiders, a team made up of 50% EU and 50% NA, a couple of players coming together and saying, it doesn't matter if NA or EU are better than each other. We can just make this little hybrid team and possibly qualify out of this upcoming tournament. So there you go. Those are 8 teams, all of which are probably going to be better this month or this weekend than they were last weekend. Ooh. And only 2 of them get to qualify for the league. Unless they somehow pull a rabbit out of their hat and beat Starburst and Crush Soda, only 2 of them are going to make it. So who are your 2? I'll give you my picks. And by the way, this doesn't include Spark, who played really well the past weekend, probably way better than what we were expecting. Spark is like the EU version of Last Resort, where when they first came together and they start playing, it's kind of underwhelming, but the longer they've been together as a team, the more and more impressive they're getting. Spark, man, I don't think they're going to qualify, but you could easily throw them into that conversation. Plus, somebody else that hasn't even played in the last one, who hasn't even signed up yet. I know Chewitt's Mafia signed up. They have a resume worthy of finding their way into the league as well. But if I had to pick two teams, if Zero plays with full send, I feel like that team has to qualify. I feel like if you're InkTV, you got to rig the bracket somehow to find a way to get full send into your league. You got to do that. So I feel like full send, if Zero plays with that same roster, they find a way to do it. And even though I think Ascension's ceiling is really high, in a tournament like this, I got to go with consistency. So my second team is going to be Squidding Good. So, yeah, more EU domination coming out of this one. But it could go either way. It's just if I had to pick two teams, give me Full Sin and Squidding Good to find a ways to sneak out of this one. And that just leaves a lot of really strong teams that have to spend the rest of the month watching a league they wish they could play in. Exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff. And you're going to get to see all of it right in front of your stupid faces. Ugh. It's time for the weekly recap. Minnow Cup, the Splat Zone edition. The 20th Minnow Cup took place on Saturday. You might have missed it. Orca Balestra, a team trying to brainwash people into thinking that we give out send-out badges for coaches who win low ink. We don't actually do that. They won Minnow Cup, beating Heaven's Reflection, who finished in second place. Secret Elixir, the team that won the most recent Minnow Cup before this one, finishes in third place. Nicely done by Orca Balestra. They've been consistent alpha bracket team going forward in the tournaments they've been playing in, and have a high ceiling, it seems like, as well. Very impressive that they were able to beat Heaven's Reflection, who's finished in second place in 2 Minnow Cups now, and finishing ahead of the team that won a prior Minnow Cup. Now, Minnow Cup has shown us that the team that's going to win the next low ink is either going to be Heaven's Reflection or Orca Balestra. So there you go. I'll put them both in the top 10. Don't come at me like that. Silver bracket was won by Galaxy Squids, a team that has won Little Squid League this year. Second place in silver bracket was Mayo Malamari, which I'm assuming is a pickup for KO Calamari, using context clues there. And third place in silver bracket went to Lost Inklings. Splat a Little, number 11, was won by DuckTales. Woo! Syntopia finishing in second place in User, finishing in third. DuckTales is made up of Minor, Drifty, Flygon, and Inri, so a bit of a nightmarish Tempest pickup sort of thing, kind of not. Flygon is a name I have not heard since, what was that SAC season where Flygon just kind of showed up out of nowhere. It's good to see them back, I guess. Finishing first place in Splat a Little, number 11. 43 teams played in this Sunday afternoon open tournaments. Congratulations, Splat a Little, for surviving for 11 tournaments. I know it's difficult finding times to get your tournaments in. Let's take a look over at the CCA, the Collegiate Cephalopod Association. Everybody's favorite college-themed league. In Division 1, UCF California San Diego, the USC Esports Gold team, beat the Case Western Reserve University team 4-3. Wow, that seems like a really competitive matchup there. Div 2, Florida Gulf Coast University, the Thunderbirds. They took on the Worcester Polytech Institute, the Grisco Workers Union. They beat them 4-1. Actually, Gulf Coast played 3 matches and won all 3 of them in the same week in Division II. They also beat the Houston team 4-1, Houston Premier, and Pal 3.0 4-2 from Purdue. University of North Carolina Greensboro got a 4-3 win over Kansas State. University of Florida Storm Cells got a 4-1 win over Purdue Pete's Platoon. And in Div 5, Bradley University got a 4-1 win over Hofstra. Rounding out your CCA weekly recap. Shout out to the official feeder of the information from the CCA into the Popcast, Smiley Riley, who sends me a weekly recap every single week that I can spew out to you guys on this podcast. I know the college folks like a shout out every now and then, and we're happy to cover that league, at least somewhat. There's also a lot of stats that they're recording for their tournament that have been posted out on Twitter, and I'm sure more information will be leaked as the season goes along. But the CCA team does a lot of hard work for their league, and it shows in the passion that they show there. So shout out to Smiley Riley for being, I guess, the contributor to the Popcast. But that was your weekly recap. Sponsored by Low Tide City. Main registration ends on April 15th. So make sure you sign up if you're on the fence about if you want to go or not. You might want to start coming to a decision sooner rather than later. I saw Zach has officially registered today. Seems like every day there's more and more notable people that I'm excited to meet that are saying they're going to be there at Low Tide City. It is the biggest... I don't know why they tweeted this out, but they said this is the biggest Splatoon Low Tide City ever, which is like this is just the second one. Like what? I guess technically that's true, but I guess it's whatever. Low Tide City, the official sponsor of today's episode of the weekly recap. There you go. Texas is far? Well, you better start walking now. You'll make it in time. Speaking of walking, though, as I have been getting a lot better at getting this set up on the fly. And it looks like I'm going to find a way to do it perfectly right here. There we go. Except that's the wrong screen. There. Not just you. There we go. Get me in the shot as well. Welcome into the Popcast. Former top competitive player, commentator, and content creator for InkTV, the Walky. Walky, how's morale today?
I mean, did you see that weekend? I think we're feeling pretty good.
I spent a lot of time talking about it. You know what? Fusion and I did not take a break. I don't know if anybody else, like if any of the other streams took breaks, but me and Fusion just kept talking that whole time. And that was the dumbest thing we did over the course of the weekend.
I think I mostly watched the InkTV one because I lost power and I could only watch on my phone. So I could only open up one stream at a time for a bit. So I think Nine and Zach took one bathroom break, like 2-minute thing. And that was about it for that entire event, which I mean, went on pretty long. Considering we were casting everything, but yeah, it was a crazy weekend. I think just that weekend in general just sets up so much to look forward to this next weekend.
Yeah, the entire month, there's just a whole lot to look forward to. The first tournament you ever played in, what was that?
Booyah Battle 1? I think it was 1, not 2. I think that was the first iteration of it. It was the beginning of Splatoon 1 competitive. So I'd say it was within the first month that competitive Splatoon was a thing. Right. So that was with name subject to change, NSTC. That was my first team ever. Notable players on that team for people to know would be Sendo and Fuzzy. Those are like the only ones that are still around right now. So still some guys that are competing at a pretty high level today. I can never do what they do. But that was my first tournament, and I didn't even want to do it. I only knew of the people on the team from a forum. We were all friends from a forum, and they coerced me into playing for them because they needed a charger for that set, and I was the charger that they knew.
So how does it feel? Because Fuzzy played with Alliance Rogue last weekend.
Hmm.
Sindao, did something else play? I realized we didn't really talk about them at all. Did they actually play?
Something else actually dropped right before the tournament, like 2 minutes before. They checked in and then left.
Okay, that was the team I just now thought about because I just assumed Sindao was Brian that
Yeah,
played
the
on
Brian
Outsiders,
team.
two different things. So as you see Fuzzy play and Sindao play really strongly today, does that like how does that feel from your perspective? Does it like get the fires going within you? And you're like, man, let me shake off the rust, get back in there with these guys.
I mean, I play the game a little bit now and then it'll take me like getting into the X rank lobby with like one other decent player that I recognize on the other team to realize I don't have it anymore. I don't play the game like I did in college, man. Like I don't have the time for that. I'm a med student. I don't have the time to play the way I used to, so I can't do it. That way I get destroyed in that. I tried Squid Kahlo the other day, the new Squid Kahlo. I got
Yeah.
absolutely destroyed. Could not keep up with those kids, but yeah, a lot has changed in this time, and I mean, I think that's like the biggest change across the community wide is the average skill of the comp player these days blows like completely out of the water what used to be in Splatoon 1 and early Splatoon 2. It's like it's not even close.
Yeah, and that's it's a good talking point because you are one of the people that were playing at the very beginning, like you said, one of the first tournaments in Splatoon 1 versus how things have changed so much over the course of time. Is there anything other than just like players getting better? Obviously, Splatoon 3 is different from Splatoon 1. We get
Hmm.
that. Or actually, in some ways, maybe it's not now that all the specials are coming back. Has the competitive scene changed in any kind of dramatic way from back in your day to where we are right now?
Um, Honestly, all right, so to give kind of perspective for what it was like back then, like Splatoon 1, I'm talking about, not Splatoon 2 or anything, but the beginning of Splatoon 1, teams were all formed kind of from what forum you were representing or you found your teammates from. So there was Reddit teams, there were Squidboards teams. I was the NeoGaf team, which doesn't exist anymore. And then there was 4chan. And so you kind of repped your forum, and there was like a weird sense of honestly like pride for it or something. I don't know, because like 4chan and Squidboards did not get along. There was this big like kind of I guess just weird pride about what forum you represented or like, and that was your clique. So there was like kind of cliques back then of who you would represent, and I think that's something that's obviously had to go at some point. Um, like teams are all going to start to mingle, and players are going to get to know each other, regardless of whatever forum you go to. Especially with like this was also the beginning of Discord, so like at that time, like people were still getting familiar with that platform. So like as people moved on to Discord and Twitter and things like that, I think there was more like congregation and collaboration between people, and so teams started forming in a different way then. But building off of that, I'd say like with everybody kind of having their own pride to where they came from, I think it kind of like when you played in, that tournament that Saturday or whatever, there was more kind of at stake. We didn't have money prizes as much back then, like maybe it happened like 3 times a year. But there was that at least that pride of oh my god, 4chan is gonna do it this time. They're finally gonna beat Squidboards, which was Dude at the time, the SRB2 Dude. Um, so it was a very different time that I think can't really be replicated today.
Yeah, maybe it shouldn't be replicated.
Yeah.
Maybe the 4chan pride should die with those teams. Oh man, imagine the Twitter community. Just yeah, I'm representing 4chan. All right, fair enough. Um, so some of the things you've been doing, Fink TV. One of them is the new interviews you've been doing, the player
Hmm.
interviews. Watched all of them. They're fantastic. I like the fact that you're asking good questions too. I like with Zero, you brought up hey, you've been second place. You know, you've had to deal with these kinds of things, and you got some great answers out of the players that you talked to. How did that, like the process of that go? Like what was it like going through that interview phase?
So I mean, just approaching the interviews in general. Like interviews are something that I've always been interested in and like wanted to do. Like I'm a big, like you, kind of a sports guy. So I watch a lot of sports podcasts. I'll watch, I'm mostly basketball. So JJ Redick's podcast, All the Smoke, that type of thing. So I try to take what they do and the way they approach their interviews with guests, and I try to kind of tailor that to Zero and figure out what the best ways to just get Zero to open up, or Power or Hunty, whoever it was, to open up and just kind of share what they wanted to share. And I think the way that I best approached that was kind of um, letting them do as much of the talking as they wanted to do. People are there to hear about Zero and learn about him and his journey through Splatoon. But also as a former player, and I've known Zero for years now. I think something that people in the sports media get criticized for now is like if a former player interviews a former player, there's kind of like that buddy buddy, and you're afraid to ask them certain questions. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't afraid to ask Zero hard hitting questions, and get Zero to open up on something that may not be easy for him to talk about.
Like a Pat McAfee, Aaron Rodgers kind of thing,
Hmm.
where it's like, okay, you're the only person that they'll let talk to this guy. Ask
Yeah.
him some real questions there. Fair enough. And it's hard to be good at interviewing. I've seen a lot of other Splatoon podcasters when they interview somebody, they'll like cut them off because they'll think of something else, and it's like, no, just let the dude talk. I want to hear what they have to say. It's hard to like listen to the person while also like thinking at the same time of like what you're gonna say next. Um, as I'm trying to figure this out live in front of you. Okay, so listen here. You're walking at the beginning of all of these things. Why is this series not called Walking with Walky?
Because it's not about me. I don't know. Like I
To
was
the
more of a
host.
secondary guy. Oh, well, for all of these, first of all, they're all very improvised. Like I know at the end of it, Spoon cuts it to make it look very good, but it's all very improvised, and that's why Spoon is gonna make fun of me forever for. In Zero's interview, I say he can't be stopped like 2 times in a row.
Yeah.
Apparently I say hitting the streets in every single video. I haven't rewatched them, so I don't know. But like they're all improvised, and I think that's the best part about it to me is I know Spoon and I can do so much better if we do it again, and that's what's exciting if we do get the opportunity to do that again.
well, you going to Low Tide City?
Spoon and I were thinking about it, and we were thinking about doing a similar thing there, but there's a lot of complications involved. For Spoon to go to Low Tide City from Canada is gonna cost him as much as it would a trip to Europe, and I mean, like you might as well
Jeez.
go with your wife to Europe.
Yeah.
And then for me, I was originally considering it, and then um, I'm also going to Spain like the day before, getting back from Spain the day before Low Tide City. So if Spoon was willing to, I was going to take a plane back to back, but I don't know if I'm going to do that anymore. It's open in the air, but as of right now, it's not looking very good.
Well, I enjoyed the series, and hopefully there's a way that you can do some more of those in the future. So transitioning over to the tournament that we had the last weekend, if you were to rate this tournament on a scale of 1 to 10, from your perspective, and you wear a lot of hats in this thing,
Mhm.
where would you rank this tournament?
Can I give point values, or you want a one, two, three, four?
We'll allow point values this time.
Okay. I'm gonna say a 9.3.
Okay.
9.3. I think it definitely deserves an A because I think it had everything you want as a player, viewer, commentator, or TO. Like literally anything you wanted, you could get from that tournament. Um, but I think like it's a solid enough A where like you feel comfortable. Yeah, you earned that A. You didn't just squeak by. But there's still plenty more towards perfection. Um, so I think I'd give it a 9.3. And I mean, like I was saying, it had everything you'd want like as a player. So like it had high level players across the board, for you to compete against, just starting off. And then like I guess take it back a little bit is like from the TO perspective, there were probably like 10 to 12 teams during that or that signed up that we were very happy if they qualified for the league because their skill level was that good. And you don't really get that often in tournaments. Like I remember sometime earlier in the week, I think there were like a low amount of signups, like last Monday or so, like maybe like 10 signups, 8 signups, 11 signups, one of those numbers. But like 90% of those teams, we were happy if they qualified. And I think when you run a major event, that's what you want. You want those high level teams. It's not about, yeah, Low Ink has what, 100 plus teams. We had 51 for this event. It's not about that. We had 10 to 12, honestly, due to like Spark and Nightmare or whatever. Maybe it was even like closer to 14 teams that you would be happy if they qualified. And so I don't think you could be, upset with that from like a TO perspective.
Oh, well, first off, Low Ink gets 200 teams now, not 100. But second off, yes, you're 100% right, and I've made that point several times before. It's quality over quantity. You cut the fat, you get the teams that the audience actually wants to see, and they got to see everything.
Yeah.
Between the teams from last weekend and the teams that will probably sign up for this one, you'll probably get like 18, maybe 20 teams that might fall into that category of I'd be more than happy if these teams made the league. I mean, I just listed off 9 teams and only seven of them are not going to make the league at all. So
Yeah.
like as you're watching the tournament and you're seeing all these teams that aren't going to qualify because there's not enough spots, like how is it just like watching through all these sets knowing that these teams are like fighting their hearts out in a loser's bracket for our entertainment, knowing that they might not qualify, even though they're probably on a good day good enough to qualify out for it.
I mean, it's just the name of the game. Like that's kind of what you're hoping and praying for as a viewer. Like this just as someone, who enjoys watching Splatoon, like that's exactly what you want is you want the success stories, you want the heartbreak, you want your favorite team to be on the brink of elimination but pull it off somehow. Like those are all the things that you want when you're watching a tournament like this. And I mean, everyone that signed up last week, I think, delivered on that front, and I don't doubt that they'll do it again this week.
Was there anything? Let's take Nightmare off the board because they're an easy answer. Anybody really stick out and surprise or thought like, wow, these guys did way better? Maybe not than what you thought, but maybe just like better than what the general public thought they might do.
Yeah. I mean, all right, like you said, Nightmare's the obvious Cinderella story, one game away from qualifying, but I think there's actually another team that was one game away from qualifying, and that's Outsiders. Outsiders loses in, which is essentially losers semis ish, in this format because you don't play after the qual game. They lose to at least one death, 2-1, and they actually won game one. And I rewatched the set, and I believe they were very close to winning another game. And then at least one death goes on to 3-0 Squidding Good, and they absolutely dominated Squidding Good in that set, in my opinion. And if it was Outsiders in that set instead of at least one death, I think they beat Squidding Good as well to qualify. And honestly, it's just out of all the teams that signed up, that was like the most kind of pickup-ish team. It was just the conglomerate of good players Brian found. So I don't think I expected them to make that type of run that they did. And they beat some good teams along the way. And like I said, I think if they beat at least one death, I think they qualify in the next run, in the next set.
And it's weird because they're in losers bracket because they almost got swept by Seafoam, who went on and got absolutely crushed by DNA. It's so exciting because it's not like A beats B and beats C. It's not like automatically this team's better than that team, so that means they're going to be better than that other team as well. Like, it seems like there's true matchups going on here,
Yeah.
and it's truly anybody's game between all of them. Uh, does if Nightmare qualifies for the if they win that game one, that Splat Zone's Mako Mark game, they hold on to that. Now that changes the course of the whole set. You can't. That doesn't mean they're automatically going to win game 3 and 4 like they did last time. But if they make the league, is it like awkward because of like what their resume was going into this tournament, or is that something that you're like, okay, there's something to build off of here for the course of the month?
Yeah, I don't think it's awkward at all. Honestly, I was kind of talking this with like Keo and other people in my stream chat yesterday. But I think we all wanted Nightmare to make the league, not just because, it's the Cinderella story, but because the reason they lost in that set to us was they just got top player difference in certain situations. Like they just didn't know what to do because they weren't put in those situations enough to know what to do. So if they're in the league and they're able to play Crush Soda, Jackpot, all these teams every, 2 times a week or every week, they'll be able to build up that experience, and I think they would be able to fit right in with everybody else. Like we talked about this, I talked about it with Keo, is they have the mechanical skill to be top players and on a top team. They just don't have the top player mentality yet.
Well, they keep playing like they did last
Yeah.
week, and they'll get it at some point. Another talking point, not just from this tournament, but it's been going on probably since back before 4chan and Reddit were battling it out back in the day. North America versus Europe. Look, when you take Starburst out of the equation, tournaments are actually interesting. It's the same thing when you take Japan out of it. And I basically at this point I see Starburst as a team from Japan, anyways, with their skill level. But if is it fair to say that over the course of probably what we've been seeing in all of Splatoon 3, that Europe as a region might be better than North America?
That's like an extremely, extremely hard question. Like obviously Europe at the beginning of Splatoon 3, I think kind of had its, I guess its woes. It was on a downfall a little bit. They weren't like consistently placing at like higher tournaments, like what was it, 20XX or so at the beginning. Um, like I think what was it, like top 3 or 4, and that was like mostly NA Japan or something. But um, I think it's very hard for me to say that Europe is better than Japan. I mean, yeah, taking away Starburst, but then I think second and third best team, at least out in the West, is Jackpot and Crush Soda. So like for you to not have the top one of the top 3 teams, it's hard for me to say like overall you're better because I mean like the averaging it out, like maybe they have 4, 5, 6, but I think then 7, 8, 9, 10 or so there's like a coin flip. Like is it DNA? Is it Ascension? Is it Last Resort on the NA side, or is it Squidding Good? Is it any of the other European teams? Is it Outsiders? Whoever. So I think at some point it just becomes a toss up of who's got the more skill at that level. And yet 3 teams from EU qualified this past week, but I mean, there was an NA team that was 1 game away. We didn't have 2 of the top NA teams in the tournament, so it could have been a very different story, and then this conversation kind of wouldn't even be a thing.
We'll find out when the league actually gets going. Full Send, Squidding Good. Yeah, there's several other teams. Chewits Mafia, I'm excited to see them
Yeah.
play this weekend.
They're another one that I think is right on Nightmare level ish. So, I mean, they had the sub from Nightmare or from Jewett. So,
When you're watching a set, you're not commentating it like you were watching the InkTV set. How how do you watch it? Do you just like sit back and enjoy it as like a just a casual stream, or are you like, what would I do if I'm playing? What would I say if I'm commentating? Like, are you analyzing the game in your head while you're actually watching it?
I would say I never just sit back and enjoy like just watching it for watching it. Like it's always analyzing, or if it's not analyzing the gameplay and what they could have done better, it's analyzing what the commentator's saying and what they could have said better. So it's honestly one or the other, and I mean that's just the way I like to enjoy watching Splatoon sets in general. Um, and I think it just comes back to like being a former player. Like you always think like what you were saying. What would you do in that situation, or what was the best play? And I think that helps me in other areas to just understand the game more anyway, and then bring that to things like commentary. So that's the way I try to approach it, and not get too focused in just hype moment or things like that. Is try to break down the play so like I understand it.
Well, let's talk about commentary for a little bit, because you probably had eight of some of the best commentators in the scene able to broadcast all the different events, all the different matches that were going on there. What, in your opinion, when you listen to a commentary, what do you listen to that makes you say, "Oh, I really enjoy this"? Versus, and I won't say who, but there are definitely times where I'm watching a Splatoon stream and I'll just mute it because I just hate what I'm hearing. Like, what do you like to hear specifically out of commentary?
I mean, for beginners, it kind of starts with like the way I watch a game. Like I watch it from an analytical perspective for the most part. So I obviously love when people are able to break down something, or bring something up and put a perspective on something that I didn't see. But then there's, that's not to say like I don't enjoy play by play or anything like that. That's 100% needed. And, there's a lot of people who I think do that really well. But I think when it comes to Splatoon commentary in general, things that kind of irk me, and like you said, might get me to mute it, is um, when people are kind of too stuck in their role. Like I think that in Splatoon 2 at commentary at some point there was like the big debate of, play by play versus color commentator. Now it's like I think people have realized that you need to at least have a little bit of both. You need to be able to go back and forth on the fly. And that's I think created better commentary than we had in Splatoon 2 for sure. But I think there's a lot that people still need to, I guess, improve themselves on. And I think a big part of that is reading situations. And I think that's something that a lot of people currently struggle with. And I this includes myself sometimes as well, is, you want to be able to do a moment justice. And that could mean a lot of things. It could be if you don't want to make every moment too hype, because then when it's at the end of the game and you get that Joby Bryant moment, is that the same as he got a triple kill at the beginning of the game? No, it's not. It's really not. Even though triple kills are amazing, if he got that triple kill but three of his teammates are down, what does it matter? Um, and then so you need to be able to read a situation like that, but then you also, I think, need to be able to read your co-commentator and realize what their tendencies are, and how what they're going to bring to the table. And I think that's why, at least on the InkTV side, we look more at pairing people who we think would be good together, rather than just these are two good commentators, let's put them together. It's can they get that ebb and flow together, and create a good broadcast.
Yeah, and from the sets I saw, especially from Zach and Nine, and I don't think it's fair to compare anybody to those two. That kind of chemistry kind of bleeds through. Yeah, it has to be fluid. And I remember in the early days of Low Ink, we would always say, well, we got the play-by-play guy and then the color analyst guy. Well, what do you talk about when there's nothing there's no like play going on that's needs to be talked about. Oh, this guy's got a clam moving to the left. Okay, well, yeah, they're both stalling out mid. There's other things to be talking about with that. So yeah, it's and I think across the board, we've gotten better as a community of having more fluid roles of commentators, like you were talking about, instead of just typecasting. Oh, I'm a play-by-play. Okay, well, anybody can be a play-by-play. You just say what's on the screen. The audience can see it as well. Take it to another level, which is something like a K-bot does really good play-by-play. It obviously nine and that moment when Joe goes over the edge and throws it in. The first word that came to my mind watching it was, "Oh, that's Kobe." And you instantly, Zach, not wasting any time, just says it. And it's like you said, giving the moment justice. There's very few people that give a moment justice. And me specifically, I know when I'm commentating and I was like, oh, this is a moment. I can't screw it up. And I feel like the pressure of not trying to screw it up makes me overdo it to a point to where it's like, oh gosh, I just ruined this moment. Now we can't clip it on Twitter without it being cringe, kind of thing. It's hard, but I feel like across the board, we've gotten a lot better as a community.
Yeah, I mean, like to bring this back to, the sports podcasts and stuff that I like to, take inspiration from, was there was a interview that JJ Redick did with Mike Breen, freaking amazing NBA commentator and sports in general, where he talked about kind of just, like I would say, doing the moment justice and like realizing like afterwards, like looking it back and thinking about it. Did you, say what you needed to say? Did you provide I guess, did you provide just, I guess it is just doing the moment, the justice that it deserves and saying like, going back, you could do a whole broadcast for maybe, I guess in Splatoon we call it like what 4 hours. But if you missed that Joe B. Bryant performance, you need to kind of be upset with yourself that you missed it. And I think that's something that we don't really have in the Splatoon community. We need to, as commentators, kind of take it a little bit more seriously. And I'm not perfect at it. 100%, I'm not perfect at it. But I think I at least have the awareness to go back and after I finish a commentary, be like, I did not do well. I did not do, I didn't do those players what they deserved. And I think that's something as a community we kind of look forward to. And because the worst thing in the world is going back, as I would say, someone who's doing like content for InkTV or whatever, just in general, not specifically this tournament, but we've had this problem in the past before, is going back in a tournament and then watching the VOD and you have zero hype moments to clip or anything like that because either everything was the same tone throughout or there was just no change from the commentator.
There's several times where, and I used to do this for the weekly recap. I would clip like the game winning audio and I would play that. Like you would hear like, here's the play of the game on a radio show or whatever. And I stopped doing that because a lot of the times it was just like, and Nightmare has won this tournament. And it's like, like, why would I even put that out there? But it's something we as a community, I feel like are getting better. And we're having these conversations now where before it was just like, hey, what two jackasses are even available to commentate this tournament? Like, can we go on Twitter? Is anybody available to commentate this thing? So again, just another incredible, like, how did InkTV even find 8 people on a weekly basis that can pull this off? It's really awesome. I don't want to take up your entire day, and I do got dinner waiting for me downstairs. What should we be looking for this weekend? And are you willing to make a pick right now on who the top 4 is going to be?
Okay. I think, like I said, there's a lot of storylines going into this weekend. So we have, can Nightmare bring through, was their last run a fluke? Can they do another Cinderella run? And can they show that they belong at that top level? Look forward to, obviously, will Last Resort bounce back now that they have Arashi? Um, and then, oh, this is something actually, I guess it's kind of breaking news-ish possible, but you were talking about it earlier on the podcast, that two of the spots are going to be going to Starburst and Crush Soda most likely. I don't think Starburst is actually going to be playing. Um, Apparently Brand might be gone for like a month or something, and they don't want to play without him. So
Oh,
um, that's the rumor that I've heard from Keo, who's heard it from obviously Starburst. Um, so that opens things up for possibly a third qualifying spot. And even if we would love to have Starburst in the league, um, we also want some parity between the teams.
yeah. I wasn't gonna say it, but like that makes everything more interesting. Honestly,
Yeah. So now you don't know who's gonna win. There's still a chance maybe they decide to sign up with a week. Maybe Brand is gonna be back for playoffs. So all they need to do is make it to playoffs. So that's something they could consider. But there's a lot to look forward to this week. There's Seafoam with Nolan. Is that gonna work out? We mentioned the outsiders as well. But I'd say right now, my picks are gonna be Crush Soda is going to be coming in from the number one spot now.
Okay.
Full Send. If they're at full strength, there's no way they're losing either 2, 3, or 4. Like there's no way that they're gonna lose twice. I think in the tournament, especially if they're on the opposite side of the bracket as Crush Soda. So I think it's gonna be Full Send if they have Zero and Taco Bon, who fell asleep because JP times. And then I think Last Resort is gonna have the bounce back. And I want to give it to Nightmare. My heart tells me to go Nightmare because I really want them to see it in it. I think it's going to come down to Nightmare versus Brian's team, Outsiders. I think it's going to come down to those two.
Well, there you go. There's your NA bias coming across there.
Yeah,
See,
100% NA
this
bias.
is why we can never appreciate EU. It's like,
I was an EU guy in Splatoon 2, man. It's not the same anymore.
well, I'm glad you weren't a 4chan guy in Splatoon 1. That's all I can say. What if, okay, so here, let's do this. You know how in chess they have like the, like nobody plays Magnus. You have to play a tournament and the winner of that plays Magnus. It's like the Contenders Cup or something like that. What if we did that? The winner of the InkTV League plays a best of 9 against Starburst, and we see how well they do against that. That I will tune in for to watch.
We don't even have to do that on InkTV. If they don't want to do it, we can do that right on the Popcast stream. Or you can do that anywhere. IPL, we'll throw that one up.
They're not going to like the overlays that I got compared to you guys. Let's say that. Where can people find you? Go ahead and plug yourself a bit.
Yeah, so obviously getting back into all this Splatoon stuff again this year, people can find me at Walkman_04 on Twitter and on Twitch. I did a kind of a rewatch of the tournament yesterday night. And probably going to do the same next week. So if you're interested in that at all, give me a follow. And, we had a good time. Me, Keo, and a bunch of others. We were just talking about what we saw during the games and what we could look forward to next week. So we'll do the same next week.
Walky, thanks for coming on. I'm sure our paths will cross again IRL at some point at a LAN in the future. And maybe we'll have you back on again whenever the time arises for it. So thank you for coming on. See you around.
Thanks.
And that was Walky, Walkman04, with another great interview. That was great. I always want to just like keep talking with these guys forever because you always get some interesting takes out of people and things. Nightmare and Last Resort. I don't know, but hey, if there's 3 spots available now, if Starburst doesn't end up playing, that makes things more interesting. It definitely makes the league more interesting, I'll tell you that much. Thank you for the raid, Captain Bob, during that one. And for everybody who's just now tuning in, you can catch the VOD on YouTube. And I'm going to be sending you off to somebody else. But if you'd like to be a part of the Popcast in any way, feel free to reach out. My socials below: Twitter, Mr_Popgun, Discord, Popgun, hashtag 5882, YouTube at 25Popgun, Twitch at Popgun25, Anchor.fm/Popgun. Next week, we're going to be talking about Little Squid League. Obviously, recap the qualifier number 2 and whatever shenanigans go on with that. And I don't know. Maybe we'll go on from there. Make sure you sign up for Little Squid League. Make sure you get vaccinated. Wear a mask when applicable. Stay safe. And if you ever get in a situation where you might be indicted by the New York police or whatever, make sure you do that peacefully and chillfully without causing too much of a fuss. Be a man and take your punishment. See you next week.